Perfect, 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 perfect. Not long ago, I had the opportunity to visit the International Motorcycle Fair in Milan, where the impressive new V-Strom 1000 was officially presented. It was then that I realized I had never ridden the V-Strom 1000, which is still on Salesso, the old new V-Strom. Hi, this is Tobias, and today we're going to talk about the old new V-Strom 1000. Do you know what the biggest problem with this motorcycle is? That it doesn't look like this, or like this, or like this either. In the frame of this motorcycle, you'll find an engine that's probably already well known to all motorcyclists, 1037cc V-twin. The cylinders are set at a 90-degree angle to each other. Each cylinder head has 4 valves, 2 spark plugs, and the engine produces 101 horsepower and exactly the same amount of torque. The whole setup is paired with a 6-speed gearbox, which in this case works perfectly. The combination of the gearbox and the engine is a kind of symbiosis and a very strong point of this motorcycle. When you twist the throttle, this motorcycle accelerates very smoothly. There are practically no jerks, and the whole experience is very comfortable to use, especially for touring, when you often change the engine load, adding and reducing throttle. There are no knocks. It's all very comfortable. But let me go back for a moment to the fuel tank. The tank holds 20 liters. 20 liters fit in the tank. I said it earlier, like Master Yoda. You can fit 20 liters in the tank. And as for this aspect, the range, you'll be watching it with great amazement. Because when riding at 150 kilometers per hour, obviously not in Poland, this motorcycle consumed 6 liters per 100 kilometers. When I reduced the speed to 120 on the highway, this machine consumed 5 liters. If I lowered the speed even further to, let's say, 90 kilometers per hour, it's nothing unusual for this machine to consume around 4 to 4.5 liters per 100 kilometers. If we compare that with a 20-liter fuel tank, the numbers become enormous. And here we can really go wild when it comes to distance. So it's definitely a true touring machine, through and through. And now let's do an acceleration test from 0 to 100. It's beefy, it's wide, visibility is excellent, so let's do it. But let me just turn on the traction control first, because I can't move my hand that fast, you know. All right. Perhaps the conducted test wasn't entirely reliable, especially since I genuinely don't possess any precise measuring devices, but I still arrive at a very interesting and quite significant conclusion. The temperature is again 4 degrees Celsius, so it's not very warm. So it's not very warm, and the traction control has quite a lot of work to do because there's not much grip, a lot. And in both cases, what happens is that the moment I twist the throttle all the way, the motorcycle is practically always teetering on the edge of lifting the front wheel, and gently, of course, the traction control keeps it in check. I suspect that I definitely wouldn't accelerate this quickly without traction control. Either the rear would slide out or the front would lift. So a point for navigation, and a point for traction control. I don't know if you know, but it's actually Suzuki that pioneered these kinds of beaks. Not Honda, not BMW, but actually Suzuki. They were the first to introduce this type of front end on the DR Beak back in the day. The V-Strom that has been accompanying me for the past few days is the XT version of the motorcycle. Travel pack, here we have crush bars, fog lights, tall windscreen with a adjustable deflector, a center stand, as well as panniers and a rack for the panniers. My favorite element of this set is the windscreen. A very simple thing. However, in conditions like today, even though it's sunny, it's quite cold, and covering several hundred kilometers can simply be difficult because it's cold. With a windscreen like this, it's not much of a problem to ride a lot of kilometers. And let my last trip be the proof of these words. I covered nearly, or maybe even over 1,000 kilometers. And okay, it wasn't super warm. We also have to remember that this motorcycle doesn't come with heated grips as standard, but riding as much as possible is definitely possible. I filled the grips with chemical hand warmers, so I had no problem preparing for the tour, which you'll be able to read about quite soon, probably already in January, in Świat Motocykli. Is the new old V-Strom 1000 an adventure touring enduro? In my opinion, it's not an adventure touring enduro at all, and the main indication of that is the suspension. 160 millimeters of travel is definitely not enough to call it an enduro, even a touring one by enduro standards. Besides, the front suspension is a bit too soft. This will be a video full of asides because I have to admit today is the second day of filming this motorcycle, and that's because I realized I had skipped a few things and discovered a few new ones, and I've thought a few things over. All right, maybe it's not an adventure touring enduro because for that the suspension just doesn't allow it, according to my wisdom, which isn't all that important. Because if we look at what motorcyclists around the world are doing with this bike, well, that theory gets debunked. They ride across Siberia, they're sinking these bikes somewhere in South America, in some puddles, they ride up into the mountains, they do all sorts of crazy things. Just go online, type in V-Strom journeys, and you'll find all kinds of everything you need. And besides, about that suspension I mentioned a moment ago, that it dives a bit too much, and when going downhill, you might hit a curb when the suspension compresses, but then I came to my senses and grabbed the screwdriver. I started toning it here, right here I was toning it, and here I toned it a bit. And now the motorcycle doesn't dive anymore, so that's quite a big difference. I honestly didn't expect it. I didn't want to mess with the suspension too much, but I did make a few adjustments. It's really nice. The rear is also adjustable, so you can very confidently and easily set everything up so that the bike is comfortable and just so that it meets your expectations. Besides that, we have spoke wheels, 17 inches at the back and 19 at the front. Well, those are geared towards touring enduro, right? Here you will be able to ride on gravel roads. If you're gonna hit the gravel, don't forget about adjusting the traction control. We have it here. There's also ABS, so everything that we want can be found on board. And here's another interesting fact. The surprises never end, because in this motorcycle, the traction control can be turned off, of course, and that's quite a nod to riders who like to venture into such places, even though it's not a touring enduro motorcycle. And if you ride into such a place, you can turn it off. You can, my friend, turn off the traction control. And the best part is now, look, the traction control is off. I'll start it up so it can run diagnostics. It won't run diagnostics. All right, you'll have to take my word for it that the traction control is completely off, as clearly confirmed by the prominent message TC off. I then carefully take the key out of the ignition, deliberately put the key back in, and subsequently turn on the ignition, and TC off is still persistently on, remains on, which means the traction control is off. Unfortunately, we can't disable the ABS, but I suspect that right here, all you need to do is pull the fuse and the ABS will be gone, or just hold the front brake, spin this wheel in first gear for a moment, and you'll no longer have ABS. There will be an error, but you'll still be able to ride safely in such terrain. Besides, it might seem that this machine isn't some kind of electronic gadget. Here we have a real motorcycle, through and through, without any fancy gizmos, TFT displays, and so on and so forth. But apart from the systems I've already mentioned, we do have a few interesting things to talk about. First of all, the motorcycle start assist. I don't remember what Suzuki calls it in their terminology. But the point is, you just press the button and the motorcycle will keep cranking the starter until it fires up. A really cool feature, especially when you're already closing your helmet, closing, you want to put on your gloves, fasten your jacket. It really comes in handy. Besides that, there's also a start assist, let's call it that. The idea here is that when you pull in the clutch and release the clutch gently, the motorcycle automatically raises the revs. And that's also a really nice feature, especially if you're starting off uphill or if you're not a seasoned, very experienced motorcyclist. This system will definitely help you and make your ride more comfortable. And if we are talking about comfort, then a big plus goes to the riding position. It's really comfortable, it's neutral, there's comfort here, there's convenience of riding. 1,000 kilometers on this motorcycle is no problem at all. The seat is very comfortable, and even after a whole day of riding, and actually even after 2 days of riding, my butt didn't hurt. Click, 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 it's low, click, 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 it's high. And in this position, there's practically no wind at all. It's probably 4, 5, 6 degrees now, and you can ride with the visor open, and it's fine. It's just fine. Besides, the bike is equipped with a solid engine guard, and it really comes in handy. This bike has a very low suspension. Look, there's only a small gap here. So even when you're going down a curb and the front suspension is compressed, you can't actually hit the curb with the guard. But that's exactly what it's there for, to protect the motorcycle from impacts. Another thing, a nod to classic design. The rider's seat is easily removable, And underneath it, we have everything you might expect. The ABS pump well, maybe you don't expect that, but right on top, there's the battery and fuses. There isn't a particularly large amount of storage space readily available here, but the truly significant fact is that you don't actually have to dig around for half a day to get to it is really valuable. Finishing touches. This motorcycle may not be the most aesthetically or the most refined motorcycle you've ever seen in history. Still, I really like these kinds of little details. You know you're riding a Suzuki, you know you're riding a V-Strom, you know you're riding a V-Strom 1000. Everything fits here. It's really nicely organized, and the rider's cockpit is also very well organized. The key is here. That's a really nice touch. Nowadays, you don't show up because I'm standing in the sun and the temperature has risen to 6 degrees. But from what I remember, below 4 degrees, a snowflake icon appears, which is just as glaring as the ABS and traction control indicators. All right, I hope it's cold enough and the snowflake icon will light up. And here it is, the snowflake. So that's a nice feature because you don't always check the current air temperature. You don't keep track of it. But when it shows up, when the 4-degree warning light comes on, you know that near the ground, on the asphalt, it could be slippery. There could be frost soon. So that's a nice touch. Another nod towards safety. Here we have a cigarette lighter socket. I really like these kinds of motorcycle surprises. Here, the number one thing is the ride itself. If you're considering buying this motorcycle, you just have to take it for a ride, not read the technical specs, not read internet forums, just get in the rider's seat or even the passenger seat, well, preferably the rider's, and start riding it, because that's when something starts to happen in your mind. Something you didn't expect, it's pure pleasure, and nothing will change that. And I still think in the end that this isn't exactly a premier test of the motorcycle. So many of you ride this machine every day. Let me know in the comments how it rides for you, how the V-Strom performs, the 1000, and whether you would recommend it to other riders, because I think that's very, very important. Take care and see you next time.